Hey y'all, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be making a floral themed card, which is a little unusual for me because I tend to steer away from florals, or not steer away, I just don't naturally gravitate towards them, but it is basically spring now in Austin. The sun has come out. It was like 80 something degrees yesterday, so I figured it's time to bring out the florals. But while I'm making that card, I'm also going to be answering some of your questions. The other day on Instagram and here on YouTube, I asked all of you to submit some questions that you might have, whether it's crafting related, business related, personal, whatever, anything goes. And today I'm going to be answering just a few of those. And the first question comes from Jenny, who asks, did you take art classes? I believe you said you come from a computer/technology background. Are you just a naturally creative person? How did you learn? Great question, Jenny. I actually never took an art class. I don't even know if I would classify what I do as art. I know there's a hot debate between fine art and crafting. Frankly, I don't care if you're creating, but I never took an art class. No, I did grow up, I feel like, a fairly creative kid. I always had kind of creative hobbies. I was really into music. I played a lot of instruments growing up, and even today just love listening and enjoying music, going to concerts. But no, in terms of like traditional art, like illustration and painting, that was never a thing that I did. And yes, from a professional stance, I did come from the technology world. I actually majored in economics in college, which I don't really know what I was planning to do with an economics degree, but somehow ended up working in tech and building software products. And in terms of learning how to make cards, honestly, I just watched a few YouTube videos when I was first starting, kind of got down the basic techniques, if you will, and then was just off to the races. The next question comes from, I believe her name is Iris, and she asks, how did you manage your nerves to start your YouTube videos? LOL, I want to start, but yeah, it's harder than I thought. Iris, I get it. As I believe most of you know, I started sharing my cards over on Instagram and TikTok first, which I found a lot easier and more natural for me, especially because I didn't do a lot of talking or showing my face. So it felt like there was this real kind of separation between people watching me versus people watching what I create. And I found that if people were just watching what I create, that was a lot easier to share. However, humans are human beings and oftentimes want to connect on a human to human level. And that's exactly why I dove into YouTube, is because I wanted to put more of my personality and myself into my content so that it felt less like I was just churning and burning through cards, and instead was building some sense of a community. Now, there's a lot of hurdles we can talk about when it comes to making content. There's, of course, the technology aspect of it, cameras, lighting, editing, which can get very overwhelming very quickly. So what I would recommend is if you are interested in sharing content, just do it. You can perfect it as you go. If you go back and look at my first videos over on TikTok, from a technical standpoint, they are pretty terrible. But the important thing was that I was creating and putting myself out there. There's this concept of the continuous art of improvement, which I try to remind myself all the time. And it's this idea that you can get 1% better every day. You don't have to show up and be perfect on day one, but as long as you are improving as you go a little bit each day, then you're gonna get where you wanna go. Now, in terms of talking to the camera, that's kind of a different hurdle that is a little different for everyone. For some people, it comes very naturally. For others, it is more of a learned skill, but you wouldn't know that by watching. But yes, a lot of times you do have to learn to speak to the camera as if you're speaking to another human. Personally, I found the easiest way to do this is just to try my best, which is easier said than done, of course, but try my best to show up on camera as my authentic self. That way I don't necessarily feel like I'm having to put on a mask or front whenever I'm talking to the camera. I can just pretend that I am talking to one of my best friends and we're kikiing, doing crafts. All right, the next question is, where do you keep all your supplies, and remember what you own? Great question. However, it's kind of two separate questions. So I actually do have a craft room tour video over on my TikTok and Instagram. I'll leave that linked down below if you're interested, though it is a little bit outdated. I think I filmed it about a year ago. So I may do an updated version here for YouTube. I don't know. Let me know if that's something you want to see. But in terms of remembering what I own, frankly, I don't. And what I mean by that is I don't have any type of system of organization, really. I don't have like a catalog that I keep a spreadsheet of every single product that I own, which I know is very popular for a lot of people. I just have kind of a internal catalog, I guess, in my brain. Sometimes I'm rummaging through my supplies and find things that I'm like, oh, I forgot I even own that. But typically I have a good idea of what I have in my stash. It's just a matter of finding it, which is probably not the best way to go about things. All right, next up, Arlene asks, how long does it usually take for each card that you make? And Arlene, that really varies a lot. I would say on average, just to make the card, like if I already have the design and know what I'm gonna do, probably anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on how complex the card is. When it comes to filming, that's what really slows things down. For instance, whenever I'm filming my ASMR style videos, those actually take quite a bit longer. Sometimes they can take up to 2 hours, just because I'm not only thinking about the design of the card itself, but I'm also thinking about each shot that's going into the video and making sure that I get the visual component just right, as well as the audio component. Also in those videos, since I typically show every single step of the process, if I mess up at some point, a lot of times I have to start over from scratch, otherwise the continuity will be messed up. So that can also cause the filming to take much longer. And then all of that to say, all those numbers that I just gave you are when I actually have the card design already planned in my head or have already done a rough draft. If I'm designing a card from scratch for the first time, that really varies. Again, sometimes it can be as little as 45 minutes, but a lot of times I'm marinating on it for hours. And I'm talking some cards I've come back to after a couple days and still struggle to figure out the design. So don't let the editing magic fool you. I am also struggling to get my cards designed sometimes. All right, next up, Petra asks, my question is, how did you balance card making and filming while you had a day job? I would love to do something similar, but really struggle to find the time because you don't only have to think about what you're making, you also have to think about how long it takes to film, edit, etc. Petra, that is a great question, and I wish I had a better answer for you, but honestly, when I was doing card making and content creation at the same time as my full-time job, it was just kind of a hustle, and I think the reason I was honestly able to do it is because I was so burnt out from my day job. I started card making genuinely because it was a creative outlet that allowed me to get some joy and fulfillment in my life that I felt like was kind of missing. I know, sounds dramatic, but whenever I was working on cards and content on the evenings and the weekends, it didn't really feel like a job. It felt like a really fun, exciting new hobby. And then being able to share it with others, I don't know, it just kind of fueled me to be able to do both at the same time. That being said, I do think it requires a ton of discipline. And I think a lot of people underestimate exactly how much work it is to do video content. So to anyone out there working a full-time job that wants to start doing content, you can totally do it, but you do need to be real with yourself and know that it's going to require a lot of your time. By the way, I think that there are some birds in the chimney behind me, so if you can hear them chirping, I'm sorry. All right, next up, MGDam868 asks, why do you question yourself so much? It's a good question. Okay, someone says, bought a Cricut Joy, can't use the Cricut Joy, help. I would gladly help you with that. Let me know what questions y'all have about the Cricut down below. I've actually been thinking I want to do a couple more Cricut videos. I have a few here on my channel teaching you to do a couple of things, but let me know down below if you have a Cricut or if you want to get a Cricut and you have specific questions, and maybe I'll make a video answering those questions soon. All right, the next question asks, when is your next collaboration with Hero Arts going to drop? That is actually an interesting question. So we were working on a new collection, which was going to be available in July, which honestly, I was super excited for. I thought it was a really fun theme. Unfortunately, that is no longer happening. I will no longer be working with Hero Arts or having any new releases with them in the near future. Unfortunately, in response to the video that I posted last week, a couple of creators took issue with the things that I shared and went to Hero Arts to voice their frustrations, essentially saying that they would boycott any future product releases that I did with Hero. And of course, that was too much of a risk in Hero Arts and Spellbinders' eyes, and so they chose to drop any future collaborations. Now, all that to say, if I did say anything in my last video that truly offended or hurt anyone in this industry, I deeply apologize. That was not at all my intention. I was just sharing my personal journey and perspective of navigating this industry, and in that I did share some concerns that I have with the way that products are currently marketed and sold to all of the consumers in a way that I think is frankly unsustainable. And even in that video, I mentioned that I don't fault anyone for the current model that exists in this industry, and I also don't pretend to have all of the solutions, but I do think that it's a conversation worth having. Now, all of that to say, I think the most unfortunate part of the situation is that clearly that message that I shared in that video resonated with most of you as well. Over 1,000 of you commented in support and saying that this message resonates with you. And the fact that a couple of creators and brands behind the scenes don't see that message and would rather cut me off, it says a lot. Since day one, I've told every brand that I've worked with that my allegiance at the end of the day is always with you guys, the viewers and consumers, and that is who I have in mind when I decide what I want to speak on and how I want to make my decisions. And if I feel I can't stay true to that, then onwards and upwards. And I don't want this to be misconstrued. I genuinely loved working with Hero Arts and Spellbinders. All of the employees and folks that I worked with there were genuinely wonderful. I just think that this is another reflection of how this industry is resistant to change. All right, enough of that. Let's move on to some more fun questions. So Rosie asks, when are you moving to San Francisco? And the answer is probably never, if we're being really honest, but I do love it and I would love to come back sometime soon. So I don't know. Hopefully I'll be there soon. Okay, this is a fun one. Someone asked, what's a millennial thing you want to stop, but you just can't help yourself? And this is a funny question because in the Instagram story where I asked y'all to submit questions, I threw up a peace sign in the photo and I mentioned that my millennial side was popping out. For those of you that don't know, I was born in 1995, which in my opinion, I know it's a little bit of a hot topic. I feel like I'm kind of on the cusp between millennial and Gen Z. I'm either a very young millennial or a very old Gen Z, and I very much identify with both sides. But anyway, honestly, and this is probably a millennial thing, but I don't feel like I do many millennial things, except I do oftentimes throw up the peace sign whenever I'm taking selfies just because I don't know what to do with my hands, so I guess that. Now, the thing that I wish other millennials would stop doing is the millennial pause. Your Instagram stories are driving me crazy. All right, this is another fun one. Someone asks, how's junk journaling going? For those of you that don't know, I am trying to pick up junk journaling / art journaling as a secondary hobby to card making. A lot of times it's easy to get caught up in how precise and defined card making can be because a lot of times you're making a card for a specific person or theme. And I wanted a creative outlet that allowed me a little bit more freedom because some days I just want to sit down and throw stuff on paper. And I also do want to get better about journaling in general. I've tried doing a few writing journals in the past where I just, write about my day, and I can never seem to keep up with those. But I feel like if I do an art journal or junk journal, it'd be a lot easier because I can just write a couple sentences or maybe a quote that's resonating with me that day, and then just put a bunch of fun paper and stamps and inks and stuff all over and make it pretty. Now, how's that going? I have the journals. I have a few supplies. I haven't really started yet. I think I did one spread I shared over on Instagram a couple of weeks ago, but I am going to get back around to it. I'm kind of waiting for something, which I don't want to share quite yet, but I'm kind of waiting on something before I go full in. So stay tuned. All right, so one question that I got a lot in various forms or fashions is essentially, how has the journey been from full-time corporate 9-to-5 worker to full-time card maker and content creator? How's that journey been, and how was it to make that decision? And honestly, overall, it's been really great, but maybe not for the reasons that you think. Yes, I enjoy what I do and feel very fortunate that I'm able to wake up and do something that is a hobby for most people as a job. I mean, that's insane, incredible. But what has also become apparent is that it is still a job. And I think that's my biggest takeaway is in life, you're always going to have things that you don't want to do. Even when the grass is greener somewhere and you get to the greener grass, you're going to feel like there's greener grass elsewhere. And so I know it's kind of cheeky, but there's that saying that's like the grass is greener where you water it. And so I think that that is my biggest takeaway, is that if you're always looking for something more or better or different, then you're never really going to find it. And you really just need to focus on how you can make what you do have better, obviously within reason. If you're in abusive, toxic places, get out. But I'm finding more comfort in nurturing what I already have versus going to look for something else elsewhere, if that makes sense. And the other big lesson that I've learned in all this is that I can do big, scary things. I often tell myself, do it scared anytime I'm feeling nervous or scared to do something. Just do it scared and do it anyway. And taking a jump from working the safe corporate 9-to-5 with wonderful benefits, yada yada, to working for myself was probably the scariest, biggest jump that I've made, at least career-wise. And even though it was so scary and terrifying at the time, seeing that I've done it and have been on the other side for 2 years now, it's a good reminder that I can do scary things. I've done them before and I can do them again, and I'm gonna be okay. All right, let's just do a couple more. So the next one is, outside of card making, what do you enjoy doing the most in whatever free time you have? That's a good question because I don't feel like I do much. But realistically, this is maybe a lame answer, but I love reality TV. So I watch a lot of reality TV, specifically The Real Housewives. I love the Bravo universe. I went to a taping of Watch What Happens Live and it was a glorious day. I also love a bunch of other trash reality TV shows. So if you want to talk reality TV, I'm your guy. But then outside of that, I don't know, this is also kind of lame, but I love just going to a coffee shop, ordering a coffee, and just spending time by myself. I love just quiet, alone time, reading a book, surfing the internet, whatever. I don't know, I just kind of like to vibe out with a coffee and my own thoughts. I'm also very much a water baby. I love to be by the water. I actually grew up a competitive swimmer and was also a lifeguard for like 5 years. So any activities outside involving the water, I'm there for. And I don't do it as much these days, but I also love to bake. I don't bake as much as I used to, I think because crafting has kind of taken that spot in terms of hobbies. But I love to bake cookies, cakes, pies, cheesecakes, all of the above. And of course, it helps that I get to eat them. Okay, this one's kind of a random one to leave on, so maybe I'll do one more after this. But the question is, have you ever considered doing a crafting cruise with your followers? Which is a very funny question because the answer is actually yes. I haven't put any real thought into it or put numbers to paper, but if you follow me over on Instagram or TikTok, you probably know that I am quite the fan of the Virgin Voyages cruise line. I've been on 3 of them in the past few years. I actually kind of swore off cruising because I went on a couple when I was younger with my family and kind of hated it. But I took a Virgin Voyages sailing a few years ago as an adult and it kind of converted me. Since then, I've made a couple of contacts with the Virgin Voyages marketing team, as well as I met a friend on one of those Virgin Voyages cruises who is actually a travel agent for Virgin Voyages. Wow, I'm saying Virgin Voyages a lot. You're welcome, Virgin. But anyway, we've actually floated the idea of possibly organizing a crafting card making cruise at some point. So I don't know. We'll see. Again, haven't put any real thought to it. The idea has just been floated, but let me know if that's something you'd be interested in realistically, or if not, what type of in-person event or retreat would you be interested in? Because I would love to host something. Okay, last question is, what tips do you have to reduce waste in your crafting, trying to be more eco-conscious in my scrapbooking? And that is a really great question because this is something that I struggle with a lot with this craft, is that it's not super eco-friendly. Of course, there are brands who are making waves to make things more eco-friendly by changing the types of materials and chemicals that go into the products we use, which is amazing. But at the end of the day, when you compare what we do to something that's, say, digital, we are creating a lot more waste, which I am not one to demonize. I think that there is a lot of value out of using these products to bring joy and fulfillment to not only our lives, but the people who receive the things that we make. But I do think it's something that we need to be conscious of. And so when I'm crafting, what I like to do is I actually have a separate trash can and a separate recycling bin. So any paper scraps that I deem are either too small or too cut up or whatever to actually use again, I will throw into the recycling bin. Everything else that maybe has like adhesive or sequins on it that I don't think will recycle, I throw into the trash can. And so I try to, divvy up the waste as much as I can. And then the other thing I do is all of the materials that I use, so dies, stamps, stencils, etc., I just store them in their original packaging. That way I feel a little less bad because most of the supplies are shipped in single-use packaging. And yes, you could throw those out and then put your supplies into fancy, expensive storage envelopes with magnet sheets, which yes, are wonderful, love them. But they're also expensive and creating more waste, which feels a little unnecessary. So for the most part, I will just store everything in the original packaging they come in, which is why a lot of times people ask me, why are you always opening new product? And my answer is, I'm not really, it just kind of looks that way. But that way you're at least getting multiple uses out of those single-use plastics and you're not buying more waste, if that makes sense. Again, it's not a perfect system. I think that there are leaps and bounds of ways that we can make this craft more sustainable, but if we all do what we can to minimize our own footprint, I think that's at least a step in the right direction. All right, I think that's enough answer questions for today without making this video way too long. I appreciate those of you who submitted questions. If I didn't get to yours, I really apologize, but I appreciate you for participating. If you still have questions you're interested to know the answers to, feel free to leave them down in the comments. If they get enough upvotes, maybe I will try to work the answers to those questions into future videos. But in any event, I hope that you learned something you didn't already know and enjoyed watching the card that I made down below. Wow, I sound like Dr. Seuss. But anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye, y'all.